Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. We're bringing another really awesome guest for you today. Today on the show, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Tara Williams, who is the founder and owner of an organization called Innovative Collegiate Consultants. They are a consultancy. They provide educational assistance and guide to neurodivergent students to ultimately help build academic confidence and independence through advocacy, through personalized executive function support, focused on their coursework as well as their daily lives. Dr. Williams earned her doctorate in synthetic inorganic chemistry, originally from the University of Sussex, and is currently a tenured professor at the College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, California, has been teaching for the last 20 years there, and she has been working with various neurodivergent students over the years across the United States since 2010, after personally noticing that these students were really struggling with a transition between K through 12 support for their individual education program to college, where different areas like self-advocacy and identification were required by a system built for the neurotypical. And her team specializes in a variety of areas, including executive functioning, coaching with an emphasis on academics, and she works with students on a variety of things, including accommodation management, email and learning management system support, as well as course planning, registration, summer school transfer courses, among others. And she's currently writing a book about her experiences and struggles as well, and documenting a lot of the cases in working with these types of students, which will be released early this year, actually. A lot to get into today that we don't normally touch on, but really excited to have her. Dr. Tara Williams, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, awesome having you. Really awesome. A lot of themes, as I mentioned before, we started recording, we don't really get into, so I'm looking to learn a lot from you. Before we even touch on the core topic of the day, would love to hear a little more about you. I mean, synthetic inorganic chemistry was not one of my favorite courses. I'd love to, hear about why, reactivity studies of electron poor titanium amides interested you so much, and a little bit of your background, and take us back a bit, if you would.
It's really funny because I tell people when they say, what made you want to get a PhD? And I say I got lost on the way to law school,
There you
because
go.
every single test I've ever taken that's career oriented always tells me I should have been a lawyer. So I started at Florida State University because I'm originally from Florida, and they have amazing scholarships in Florida. So I went to school at Florida State, and I was political science, thought I would be a lawyer, was ready to do that for the rest of my life. My big brother's a lawyer. And I didn't like the political science classes, even though it was funny because I lived in Florida when the 2000 election happened and all of
Mhm.
that was going on in Florida. So my political science classes were very interesting, especially that semester, but I just didn't see myself loving it. And and then I switched in for a couple other majors, and then I was criminology and English literature.
Okay.
And when I became a criminology major, it was early 2000s, like CSI was huge. And I was like, this looks so cool. I really want to do this. So my junior year, I went to talk to an advisor who was like, you have to switch from criminology to chemistry. Is
Mhm.
this something that you really want to do? And I was like, of course, like, why not? Wasn't exactly super supportive, my advisor, but I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I switched to chemistry, and I finished that. And then I'm a first generation student in my family. My brother and I both are. So when people were like, oh, you can either get a master's for, um, you know, at the time it was probably 50,000. Or you can get a PhD for free. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Never knowing what a PhD actually entailed, right? So, so I started at the University of Tennessee, and I really enjoyed the coursework, but maybe not my lab so much. And I had another professor that I worked with, and then I taught for, and I just fit much better with him. He was British, and he said, I'm moving to England. I want you to come with me. So I quit my other research group. I moved to England, and we went from there. So, so he was a very much, we would say, a synthetic physical and organic chemist,
Okay.
meaning he worked on physics and math and also synthesis, which is what I did. So we were basically looking for a way to capture CO2. So how do we add CO2 to something? Because, whoever figures out our CO2 problem is
Yeah.
the best, richest, whatever we want to say, right? Country in the world. And I always loved that um, about academia, that it wasn't working for big oil or something like that. So
Sure.
we worked on that project, and it was just, I liked working in the lab, but I couldn't imagine. I mean, it's a chemistry PhD, so 70, 80-hour weeks being, in a lab all day. And what I loved about that was that had like three or four different projects. So I was always working on something. The lab, all my lab mates were in their 20s. We were all doing the same thing, same goals. And then when it came to leaving, I was like, I don't want to be in a lab the rest of my life inside doing the same thing. Like I couldn't imagine that. So that kind of led me toward teaching. But yeah, that was sort of my experience. I loved being in the lab. I loved the critical thinking part of it. And to get a PhD, you have to find something no one in the world has ever done, right?
Yeah.
So and publish it. So the stress of that is a lot. But like I said, finding my people, we were all kind of doing the same thing. But it was also in England, so a totally new place, totally new culture. And really not great weather most of the year. So,
Yeah.
and growing up in Florida, I was like, oh my God. But the things that I learned living in another country in my early 20s and like being able to reflect on the US and being able to reflect on other things, it just really was a life changer for me, making that transition when I was that young.
Awesome. Yeah, let's jump into the core topic of the day, and then we'll loop back to some of what you began to experience as you began teaching. But the term neurodivergent, obviously it's used a lot today, and just sort of reading a lot about it, getting ready to talk to you in 2026, I came across a lot of what it is not, basically. It is not a medical diagnosis. It is not one condition. It is not a disability. It's not a value judgment. It's a broad term that describes cognitive diversity. There's a lot that goes into its framing in a 2026 world, and how we think of students, how we think of how people learn. Take a little time and just for our audience that may have never heard the term before, what does neurodivergent mean in 2026?
I mean, for me, I think it just means that you think differently, right? That we analyze things differently, that we learn differently, which, I remember being in high school, right, in the 90s, and like someone drawing a cube on the board, right? Like that is what we did for some of our classes. And like not everybody learns that way, right? Like I don't think I ever understood what a cube really was personally until someone put one in my hand when I took geometry, where I could turn it around, where I could look at it, and I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense to me than looking at a flat object, right? And so my way of thinking is very visual, right? And I also like I can read instructions, but unless I have pictures, it does nothing for me. So and some people are auditory, some people are visual. There's a bunch of different ways of learning. So to me, neurodivergent just means we think differently from what we would say neurotypical, which but could learn in the more typical ways. So neurodivergent also, I think, came from people didn't like the word learning disability, right? Like nobody likes the word disability, difficulty. It's not a great framing of anything. So I think that word is much more well accepted by the community and it not being a disability. It just means that you think differently. I also think that maybe you read some of this, like neurodivergence is seen as a superpower in a lot of ways. Like there are a lot of neurodivergent people who are, in technology, in STEM, in art. Like it's just a different way of thinking, and people having those qualities maybe have something like hyper focus, where they can literally work on something for hours at a time and stay focused if they're really interested in it, or like the creative way of thinking, right? Which I'm not super creative, so I can embrace that. But there's so much neurodivergence in every sort of realm, whether it's artistic or STEM or anything that we can think of.
And as I mentioned in the bio, you began noticing certain trends in terms of this transition period between K through 12 and then ultimately college. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about, well, some of your experiences on that front, but at the same time some of the unique situations that neurodivergent students face during that transition, because again, a lot of things change in terms of the independent study versus structure, the advocacy, of course, the various social demands. And then there was this one thing that is quite interesting. This goes back to, I guess, the core of your organization, this whole concept of executive functioning, where sort of just intelligence doesn't always compensate for the loss of that anymore once you get to college, and there needs a much better balance there. Take us back a little bit of what you were experiencing as you started teaching, and a little bit of what makes these students facing college such a different process than prior to college.
I think a lot of students, in my experience, were signed up for sort of an IEP in high school, which is largely, managed by their parents and their teachers, right? So, you have the meeting at the beginning of the year, sort of your teachers know about it, things are set. Where when you get to college, you're now an adult. So you can either sign up for it or not, right? And you have to do it yourself. And I think there's, a lot of students that don't want to self-identify and say, I'm neurodivergent or I have autism, I have ADHD. And so they are now having to, so if they had a meeting that was already set for them in high school, now they have to set the meeting. So that's sort of the first steps in getting their accommodations. And if you have struggles with executive functioning, like organization, time management, you're not thinking that, hey, like if I don't make an appointment with my college, say in the summer, I'm not going to get my accommodations figured out until maybe October, right? And some of these accommodations are so essential, like having note takers, getting time in a quiet room to take your exams, time and a half to double time on exams, things like that. And so I was finding a lot of students were saying to me, hey, like I have accommodations, but I technically don't have them because I haven't signed up yet. Right. So that, if we're sitting in October, November, you're almost at the end of the semester, or at least midway through, and they haven't had the accommodations they were always used to in high school. So I would say that's one of the biggest transition issues is not signing up for that. Because now that falls to them, right? And a lot of times too, when you're in high school, I think parents have access to their Google Classroom or whatever, they're using as their learning management system. And so they're aware. But in college, like if a student misses an assignment, maybe they see it and they're like, oh, I missed that. And there's maybe some shame to it, right? And so like, I'll just do better on the next one. Instead of just emailing them and saying, hey, I missed this, right? Like, is there any way I can turn it in? If not, like, can I turn it in for you to look at just so I get some feedback? And most of the time a professor will say, okay, it's one time, like whatever. It's professorial, such a hard word, discretion. But at the same time, like a lot of students, if they're struggling with their executive functioning, once that happens, there may be a snowball effect where like then they just stop turning in anything. Right. So I would see that with some of my students in my classes and sort of go up to them and be like, hey, I've noticed you missed two or three things. Can we talk about it? Like, is there something going on I should know about? Um, or like feedback of they're always raising their hand in class and they know the answer, but then they're not doing well on their exams. So, like, what's going on? Where is the disconnect? So, those were sort of the things that I was seeing, or students who did really well in the lab, like the lab, they knew what they were doing, they're getting their data, everything is set, and they don't turn it in. So once again, like where are we having this disconnect between maybe poor executive functioning and, the success in the class?
Mhm. And staying on that topic for a moment, because this basket of skills that executive functioning encompasses is rather broad. I mean, and obviously we use these tools. See them referred to as sort of the air traffic control for your daily life.
Yeah.
Any interesting? You mentioned sort of about the neurodivergent superpowers, but when we talk about any of the sort of subdivision of the neurodivergent, basket, any interesting myths that you can dispel or interesting superpowers, let's say, within that basket that you would not normally think about, like that actually improve executive functioning in certain cases, whether it's someone with ADHD or dyslexia or whatever the case may be. Any things that you can dispel or wish more people understood on that front, and then we'll get into a little some of the other work you do.
I mean, I think the myth would be that they're not interested or that they don't want to turn things in, like whether
Mhm.
that be at work or at school. Like there's usually something stopping them, or a lot of times people that struggle with executive functioning just don't know how to get started. So they will
Mhm.
literally stare at a screen for 3 hours. Right? Or if there's some perfectionism, OCD that comes in there, everything has to be perfect. So maybe they write 5 sentences and then look at that sentence for 2 hours, right? I don't know where to go next. This isn't perfect. What if this isn't right? So those sort of things are what people struggle with. It's not that they don't want to do the work, right? Or that it's just sometimes needing someone to be like, it's okay, we're going to keep going. Like you can do this. Or just, a lot of times maybe people are turning things in at the beginning of class and they don't realize it, or they miss a due date or whatever it is. Especially, I feel like with technology, even in schools, right? Like you have your syllabi, you have your learning management system. Sometimes professors use Google outside of learning management, so emails. So you're now checking 4 things to see if you've missed something. And some professors use learning management systems, some don't. So some have a completely organized, this is what we're doing from day one to week 16. And some, there's 5 different places to look. So in a lot of that, in those ways, it's just sort of like us when we have a new job and we're navigating 5 different new things, whether that's email, Slack, whatever, people use at work. But even then, phone calls, but even then, that seems like less to me than what students are having to do. So I think the biggest myth is that they don't want to do the work. A lot of times they're just struggling. And then, sort of a superpower is literally what we call body doubling, which just means there is someone else doing it with you. And it is the best thing that I ever tell my students. So, like, my students will always tell you, like, I could not fold my laundry until I would call one of my friends and just be like, hey. And, I feel like that all the time. Like, it's so much easier sometimes when you're overwhelmed. Like, I've even heard of now where adults have like a party where they all bring something they've been putting off and they all do it together. Right.
Mhm.
So, because like maybe it's a passport, maybe it's like signing up for something, but we all do better when there's someone to sort of, hey, I'm going to do this too. Like, let's help each other. But body doubling is so useful for students. That's why I tell them, like, don't study in your room alone. Even if you're at the library, other people are doing what you're should be doing or supposed to be. I hate using that, but supposed to be doing. So you're more likely to do it. Go to a coffee shop, right? Where other people are working. Because if you can't get started and you're sitting by yourself, there's not, I mean, I feel the same way at home. Like sometimes I just need to leave the environment and do it. And a lot of times, like, I feel like when we were younger, I don't know about you, but sort of when we sat around the table and did homework at night, there wasn't people in their rooms, right? Where
Yeah.
now it's so much different because you have a computer where my parents would be like, hey, it's homework time. Like, we're going to sit down and do it. So they would be working on their checkbook or whatever it is, right? And we would
Yeah.
be doing homework. But I feel like we lost that somewhere because of technology and because now we have, both people in a household work. Like things have just changed so much over the years. But I
Mhm.
feel like that's why when parents come to me in K-12 and they're like, how do I get my son or daughter to work on their homework? I'm like, sit with them. Like, don't sit with them behind, their shoulder, like staring at the screen, but do something else. It helps us all to have that. So I think that's one of the biggest superpowers is body doubling.
Yeah. It's funny because and we'll put a link to this, of course, but in addition to obviously the Innovative Collegiate Consultants, which is your company, you also have a really cool TikTok page, and it has these Tara's tips on it. And body doubling was, was one of the ones that was kind of interesting in terms of, you were saying, studying alongside somebody, even virtually, can help boost the attention, accountability, and so forth. I thought, there was a couple other interesting ones on here we can talk about, if there's other ones that you want to mention, but the whole principle, actually, and these two kind of go together. One of the main ones was sort of this just principle of breaking big tasks into smaller ones, making them more manageable. At the same time, you mentioned about celebrating the small wins, and I thought those sort of nicely went hand in hand in terms of measuring consistency and growth, and not just the big score at the end of the day. Talk a little bit about that. I think there are two important tips that fit together.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the celebrating the small wins, right? Like I think that this is something that all of us do. I mean, I tell students with the chunking, right? Like, let's say you have a big paper and there's 5 questions, or even if it's a discussion post, there's 5 questions in there. So if that looks really scary for you, like let's put one question and then the next question and then the next question in a Google Doc or however we do it, answer one at a time. When they're looking at one big thing, it's really, it's really scary. Or if you have a 10-page paper, let's break that into, it's also funny too, because I feel like outlining is a lost habit, right? Where when we were young, it was like, here's your first paragraph, here's your second paragraph, here's your idea, when you're writing a huge paper or doing a huge assignment, and that just got lost somewhere. My students don't really know how to outline. They learn it again, I feel like, in high school and college, but that's basically taking a big task and breaking it down, right? So, but for me, like I think talking about the wins is like I try to pick something in the morning when I'm tired, when I'm drinking my
Yep.
coffee. Like, what's the easiest thing I can do on my list? Because then you feel automatically like, oh, I did something, so I can do something else, right?
Yep.
So send that email, respond to that person, read that small article, and then from there, try to make it into your to-do list, into your bigger task. But celebrating that win of, okay, I did that. I've been meaning to do that since yesterday. It's done. I think that really helps. And same thing with like chunking their day into small tasks. Like there's no reason that anyone, you can mark off, I'm going to go to the library from 12 to 4 and study for my exam. Like none of us have the attention span to do that anymore, right? So I say like chunking, using timers is a great way to do that. Like, hey, I'm going to work for 30 minutes and I'm going to give myself a 5-minute break. And if that's possible, go do some movement, walk around, give yourself a minute, go back, sit down, work that way. I mean, I remember being in college and trying to do that. I'm going to study for this amount of hours, but like you're sitting in a library. Once again, it was usually by myself or in a group, and nobody can sit and study for 5 hours, right? It's even now, like when we talk about like how offices are, people have to get up and move their brain and move their body, and chunking those into 30 minutes on, give yourself 5 minutes off, take a walk, get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever it is, right? I think movement is so important to that. But like I said, I think this is all something that we do usually in the workplace, but maybe we haven't thought of in a long time. Like even when I was in elementary school or middle school, when you had to, maybe more middle school, where you had to sit for the entire hour and listen to your teacher. Like by the end, I was even like zoning off, right? Like, and then
Yep.
thank God we got that 10-minute break between classes where you got to do all that. But somehow we lose that along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Agree 100% on that one. Um, a couple other, tips that, fit together quite nicely, I think. And again, this one, we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the general, situation on college campuses nowadays in terms of how they help or sort of don't help as much as they should be helping. But the combination of one of your tips in terms of clarifying, for the so-called faculty or disability offices that support a neurodivergent student. At the same time, one of your tips was use the accessibility office early and often, and don't wait till crises happen. Um, what is the accessibility office anyway? I mean, for those that are unfamiliar with that term, and then say a couple words about these tips. I think they're also kind of important.
Yeah, so that's sort of what I was talking about before, where so every college is going to have an accessibility office or
Mhm.
disability services. They all have different names, but that is where you're going to send your paperwork with your diagnoses, and then set up a meeting with them. They go through it and say, here is what you are authorized to have, and then is there anything else you want to talk about? So, and then they set you up with your note takers, with your whatever thing that they use to set up exams. And every school is different, especially depending on population. Some schools you have to sign up for an exam a week or two in advance. Which for students with executive functioning, that's difficult. Smaller ones, maybe a few days in advance. Your note takers, like you basically also, you will get at the beginning of the semester a letter that they sort of make for you, and then you send it out to your professors. So, or some are automatically sent, just depends on the school. But those will also tell your professors, hey, here is what I need, right? Not what I want, but what I need. And how can we work around that? Especially as accommodations change. Like I have some students who maybe have accommodations to step out of the classroom for a few minutes, right? Or to sit in a certain place, like preferential seating, rather than just the normal, extra time, note takers, quiet room, things like that. So those accommodations are very important and so the Office of Accessibility does a great job at helping them with that. And if there are you're struggling with a professor, or maybe something isn't working the way you want it to, you can go to that office and talk to them, and they advocate for you. So
Mhm.
that's why the Office of Accessibility is so important. But once again, it's just getting the first step of getting signed up, getting started, because they have a lot of students that they are also, case managing and helping every week. So their schedule gets very busy.
Got it. Yeah, and along those lines, Tara, I mean, transitioning into thinking broadly about higher education, I mean, what's the situation, sort of the high level situation, if we would just look at the United States across the thousands of colleges and universities we have here, are there, I mean, without, I guess, shaming them, I mean, are there schools that do better than others? And then, if you are involved in it, they call you up and say, hey, come redesign our entire experience for so we have the appropriate situation for neurodivergent students. I mean, are there grand plans that you think about if someone, okay, here's a tremendous amount of money and we want to do this to X, Y, and Z universities? I mean, what's on your list in terms of making the A plus neurodivergent school versus those that maybe do a less good job than others?
Um, I mean, honestly, I think a lot of it does come down to the actual professors.
Okay.
Because that's like we are not, we don't get a ton of training. We are not K-12. We are subject matter experts as professors. So you're walking out of a PhD and maybe you haven't gotten any teacher training. Like, and then you're in a classroom, right? So you don't even know what accessibility really is. I didn't until I started working in the space. You get the paperwork and you don't really know what to do. So then you're now working with the Office of Accessibility, trying to figure out the best way to work with your students, right? So for me, honestly, I think it starts with training with the professors, and that has to be, professors have to be open to that. But also, I think flexibility from the professors. I've had students ask me, "Hey, like, can I wear my headphones in class?" Like, and I'm like, "Is there anything on them?" And they're, no, and they show it to me, and then like that's not an accommodation that maybe would be offered to them, but if it helps them, like, why do I care? Right? Like, if that's something that helps my students, or um, like if for the noise or for the stress or whatever. So I think it's and the flexibility of assignments. If they miss an assignment, like maybe put it on your syllabus. Hey, you can miss two assignments, right? And then, turn it in later. Or I'm even going to try this semester in if a student fails a quiz or a large number, point assignment, then I'm going to put it on the final. And if they do better, then I'm going to replace that grade.
Mhm.
So thinking of more about second chances, as we know in the workforce, we get second chances. So why does that not happen in school? right? All the time, right? It's even when I tell my students when they're feeling shame about not turning something in or missing a deadline, I'm like, you're a human being. Like I've missed a deadline, right? Like it's okay. And also, especially freshman year, you're now thrown into a social experiment of you've maybe always had your own room, and now you are living with two other humans in a
Yep.
very small space with very different habits and a very different lifestyle. And like to me, that's crazy enough when you think about it, right? And that transition, and then the transition to school, and then maybe you've always had the same friends at your high school or it's smaller, you've had the same life, and now everything is different. So I really think social programs are also really great for students so that they can get to know each other before the beginning of school. And a lot of schools do that, especially for students with autism. They will have a program for those students to come in early to get to know each other, to go around the campus. There's usually called a bridge program, and they have those for both ADHD and autistic students. And it's something that we are starting this year at my company that we're super excited about. So, I think that having that bridge and knowing what's going on before you get to school makes it a lot less scary. So if I had the opportunity, I would say that every school should have a bridge program and should have professor trainings where we learn more and more about this, and not just trainings as we talk at you, like let's bring your syllabus and an assignment and let's look at how we can make that better for neurodivergent students, which makes it better for everyone. Concept of universal design is so important. If it helps a certain amount of students, it's going to help everyone.
Absolutely. Now, let's also talk about, the parents here, because obviously this is one thing that, in the transition to college, as we were chatting, this relationship significantly shifts. I have two kids in college right now, and I they cannot body double with me. I'm in Philly, they're down the road in New York, and I
Yeah,
can't stand over them, helping with, like, I can never help with calculus, but whatever.
I can't either
What are
anymore. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
Yeah, I mean, what is some of the advice that you give to parents now in terms of how to advocate without doing everything for them, and what are how what are there tarot tips for parents that you recommend, such that we get they get the support from parents, but we're not hindering the process as this proceeds along its natural course.
I mean, I think I'll like you just use the word I was going to use, which is supportive, right? So staying supportive, but guiding them on how to do it themselves. So, I mean, it's exactly what, like I said, we do as well. So if they tell you, Mom, I missed this assignment, then being like, hey, why don't you email your professor and figure out how to do that? Or, why don't you write it and then I'll look at it and then you can send it if you're struggling, right? So having them learning how to advocate, but also sort of making them accountable. Hey, like if you want me to look at it, I can do that if they're nervous. A lot of students are nervous talking to professors, I've found, no matter what subject or whatever. Obviously, STEM, I feel like we're always scarier, but in general, so I think those kind of things. Or if they're having an issue with their roommate, right? Like let's point to I hear about roommate issues all the time, right? Once again, it's
Sure.
that social experiment. Then let's point them in the direction of the RA, or, teaching them like conflict resolution is such an important part of life. So how can they work with someone, live with someone, and learn how to advocate with the person or learn how to talk to them without getting involved?
Yeah.
Because I think parents automatically they just want to jump in and help and fix the situation when students have to learn how to fix it themselves.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing, even with body doubling, like, if they're really struggling with something, then you're on the computer, they're on the computer, you're just there for support. They're working on something if that needs to be done, if they're hitting a deadline.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, pointing them in the direction of student services, of the accessibility office, of the tutoring center, of their professors, but not doing it for them, helping them find the resources, but not going there for them or emailing them for them. So just because we all need to learn how to do that, right? Especially you hear about all the funny things on social media about parents still making doctor's appointments for their kids at 30, filling out their resume for jobs, like things like that. And I think that I know when I was young, like when I was 18, my mom was like, hey, here's the number of the health center, go figure it out.
Right.
right? Though I do have to tell a funny story that so Florida State's on close to the Georgia line, and this was before like any kind of GPS. And I remember calling my mom and being like, "I'm in Georgia," and she's like, "Okay."
Okay.
And she's like, "Okay." And I was like, "I don't know how to get back to Florida." So she was like, "Okay, like let me calm down, pull over at a gas station." Like she's literally getting out the map, right?
Yeah.
And being
Yeah.
like, "What do you see?" Right? So I know that I was the same thing, but it was literally, or the first time I had to go to the registrar's office, that is at the stadium at Florida State. I lost my car. So I had to I called my mom. Mom, I don't know what to do. And she's like, well, I can't help you, Tara, because I'm not there. So who can you see? Who can you find? Is there a security person? And I found my car. But so same thing. Like she did that. Well, because of technology, you couldn't, right? But in
Right.
general, it would just be like, I'm going to point you in the right direction of where to go, but you have to go do it. So that's what I would say my biggest advice to parents is point them in the right direction, support them, especially if they're, having a meltdown or something is so stressful, but then having them do it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's no, those are great points, and the the map story is hysterical because my kids, they used to ask me all the time, "How did you get anywhere without the GPS and a cell phone?" I was like, "We got places." We
Yeah. I know. And you live, like, I'm in LA. I would never, without my GPS, like, I know east and west and I know north and south, but besides
yeah,
that, like, I would never find my way.
that's what I would have told you. I was like, just go south, Tara, and
Yeah. You'll figure it
you'll
out.
run to Florida at some point. But yeah, I mean, the other interesting thing I'd love to hear a little bit about from you, Tara, because as part of Innovative Collegiate Consultants, you're involved in internships and job searching, of course, post college readiness. What should we know about this? I mean, again, how neurodivergent students should think about career paths. Are there mistakes that are made for neurodivergent students when choosing, no, I'm not. Yes, I'm going to do synthetic organic chemistry. No, I'm not going to do something else. When should career planning begin for neurodivergent students? Take us down this path a bit.
I mean, I think for internships, the biggest sort of, I don't want to say mistake, lesson, right, is like even for the summer, they start accepting people in November, December. So thinking in advance for that is going to be super important. There are smaller companies, right? But if you live in a New York or California, right, those are going to fill up very quickly, especially in, entertainment, business, all the ones that people really want to do. So that preparation is super important. And I think internships are the only way to know what you want to do as a job or what you don't want to do. I sort of didn't talk about this earlier, but I worked for two law firms when I was in college, like interned, or was a runner, whatever, and I hated it. And that's how I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. Right? Like I was like, oh God, this is what they do all day. Like same thing. I'm inside, you're inside all day staring at something. So that was for me how I figured it out. So I think internships or job shadowing or, a lot of internships aren't paid and that's just the world we live in now. But the what you learn from that is what you do or don't want to do, right?
Mhm.
And the confidence that comes from it. Oh, I can do this, right? This would be my job. Like I'm learning a little bit, and every year I'll learn a little bit more. And then when I get there, I'll feel prepared. Because I don't know about you, but there's a lot of jobs I've started, even as a professor, where I was like, I don't even know if I'm doing this right. Like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job, right? And all the things that I learned about tenure in the process. Like, I literally took a job and I was like, oh, what's tenure? Like, I knew what it was, but not the process of what I would have to do. So, I think the most important things are early, right? Apply to as many as you can. And really, while you're in it, get the most out of it that you can to figure out, do I want to do this? Like, is real estate really what I want to do? Or is accounting really what I want to do? Or do I just like business and maybe there's another path for me? Um, and then I would say that leads into sort of career of looking at what companies offer you because you're still offered accommodations, right? Like that doesn't
Right.
just go away when you're not in school. Because I often have the conversations with people that tell me, it's people thought it was what I was asking for versus what I need, right? Or
Right.
I need this to be successful. I
Right.
need you to tell me in more detail what I need to do. I need you to give me Like, not next Thursday, this is due. I need you to tell me it's due next Thursday at 9 a.m. Like, same thing, right? Like,
Okay.
they need consistency. So if a job can't give that to you, maybe that's not the job for you. If you need headphones at your workspace, if you need an office that doesn't have 17 people in it at the same time, like, what do you need to be successful? And if they can't offer that for you, maybe don't put yourself in a situation where you're automatically going to feel stressed from day one, because
Mhm.
that's nobody wants to feel like that. We've all had jobs where we felt like that, and it's not a great experience. So that's why I think the internshiping is great, because I've had students that maybe wanted to like I said, I use accounting, that wanted to do accounting, and they work for an accounting firm, and they were like, I hate this. So they became maybe a finance major, or they became I really enjoyed real estate, right? That gives me the ability to go out into the community and to see things where I'm not behind a desk all day.
Mhm.
So, and that's what I learned about not wanting to do law. So, and then I think you also learn about the companies, watching like what do they offer their employees. So you also maybe know what to ask for when you go to a
Yep.
job. Hey, like, I've done these internships. I really needed this to be successful. Can you offer me that?
No, it's a lot to get into, but I mean it's a very complex topic, but it's very refreshing again hearing your approach and you're thinking about all these different issues. What about technology? I mean, technology and innovation is such a hard topic for our show, and you mentioned some of sort of the, I would say, lower hanging fruit teaching strategies like task chunking and so forth. And how do you feel about, the tools, what it gets you excited in terms of text to speech or special note taking apps or anything like that? And then at the same time, love to just, obviously you have a great TikTok site there and offering these tips and getting information out. Um, you know, where does social media fit into this? I mean, I was reading a little bit before about how, it's great for community building for the neurodivergent student and normalizing, some experiences that, have been, maybe not normalized in the past. But again, social media as a tool and for the neurodivergent student, and how you feel one way or another.
I mean, I think that seeing people who are like us, right, makes us feel more normal, whatever that looks like. We hear that from students all the time. Like, as a student of color, when you see a scientist of color, you're like, oh, I can do that. I can achieve that, right? Or I posted this week that there's Barbie now made a
Yep.
Barbie with autism, right? And
Yep.
seeing people who are like you makes you feel that you can be successful. So I think that social media is really great for that. And like you said, that building of community. And I think that's all great. But I do think all of us post COVID are really wanting a face-to-face community as well, right? So I would always tell my students, like, go to stuff on campus, go to clubs, go to whatever. So because I think that us staying on our phones is also sort of keeping us from meeting other people, which
Yep.
your community and who you have is super important. But social media there are a lot of people who do a great job at explaining things, at helping students feel normal, helping people feel normal, right? We're all going through this. I have ADHD. What are some things that I can do? And just, watching someone sitting in the thick of it, being like, this is what I struggle with, right? Just makes you feel like I'm not alone. So I think social media is really great for that. But please go out in the community and meet your people because
Yeah.
that's such an important thing as well.
Get it out of the house, kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Um, Is there, what we have, any other, I mean, you mentioned, like you said, any other interesting success stories that you want to mention while we have you today? I mean, I'm sure you have, so many, clients now and you've seen all sorts of situations, but any interesting success stories you can share with us today of examples of folks that really thrived. So once they, had the Tara tips, the Innovative Collegiate Consulting, and had the right support behind them that you want to share while you're here today.
Yeah, of course. Yes, I've had a lot of success stories. One in like I think the biggest one, well, a couple that I can think of is when the student was not afraid to change their major, was not afraid to say, this is not for me. I can't do this, every day. This is too much for me emotionally, mentally, or I just don't like this. Where I feel like a lot of students think that they want to do something and that they have to stick with it because they started, right?
Mhm.
So I had a student who was a STEM major and then was like failing out when I met him. He wasn't doing well. He had started um, chemistry and biology and stuff during COVID, which was very difficult. I know as a professor, it was difficult for all of us, and wasn't doing well. Was on academic probation. And, we tried that next semester and we got him almost up to where he should be, and then filed all the appeal paperwork and stuff because he came so far. And they were like, yes, you have one more semester, right? And, having the conversation of, do you really want to do this? And he was like, no, I hate this. So, okay, like what can we figure out? So he was really interested in computer science. So he was like, what about business? And then I can look into, what I can do with businesses and computer science down the road, whatever that is, because he was super interested in like cybersecurity and things like that. So he became a business major. He thrived in that. And then he got a certificate in cybersecurity, and now he is in law school to become a lawyer who works on cybersecurity. So
Mm,
he's in his second year of law school, and because he didn't start out maybe fantastically on the GPA scale, he went to school the first year in law school, and then he transferred to a school that he thought would be a better fit, and was more on the level he wanted to go to. So he's in his second year. He's doing amazing. We work together, and he still checks in with me because I helped him with his transfer paperwork to the other law school, just looking at some essays and stuff. But he's doing great. I would say all of my students are success stories, but the ones that maybe really started in the academic hole of they weren't using their accommodations at the beginning. They came to me like third semester and they had like a 1 point something GPA, and we have to climb that hill and the stress that goes with that of just not being kicked out of school,
mm,
right? And then from there, where are we going to go? So that's also where I think now more neurodivergent students are working with therapists or ed therapists or whatever, and they say, hey, if you think, we know that your student is going to struggle when they get to college because we've been working with them, like find them an executive functioning coach, make sure they're using their accommodations on campus and the Office of Accessibility, things like that. Make sure they're registered early because the students that I get that are struggling the most never did that. They
mm,
never asked for help. They never signed up for their accommodations. And they've always had that, and then they go to having no support and all the social things, and it just doesn't bode well for all students.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, again, it's as you said at the beginning, it's a very complex term that encompasses so much, and obviously, it's going to be extremely individualized and personalized as you develop these programs. But yeah, no, it's yeah, and it's really impressive work that you do, and thinking about all these different parts of this puzzle. I was just, I know I mentioned in the bio that your book's coming out soon, and the title is going to be the Neurodivergent Student Journey: A Story of Hope and Breaking Out of the Box. What's the? It's available for pre-sale right now somewhere, right? What's the
It was.
status of the book?
It's
And
not. It's not anymore.
okay,
But it'll be published in May. So in
in
mid-May,
May.
yeah, I'm working on the
Okay.
final edits. So I'm struggling with my own executive functioning, trying to get all of that done and have my teaching position and the business. But yeah, I basically talk about my own journey in academia and my own struggles when I was younger. And then I do a case study on several of my students, sort of where we started, what things that we used to sort of get them where they needed to be. And then at the end, we talk about all those success stories. So, and then we talk about a lot of resources at colleges or scholarships or things that are available. Breaking out of the box was just a term that we use that I feel like we everybody wants to put everybody in a box, right? Nowadays of, oh, this is how they think, this is how they learn, this is who they are, where we're not just in one box, we are in many boxes and trying to get to stop putting students in a certain box. Like I was even in that box when I was younger, like, oh, you're not good at math. Like girls aren't good at math when I was struggling. And I took a test that when I was in seventh grade to go on to my next math class, and I didn't do well in it because I was never a great tester. And that put me behind the rest of my academic career. I never got to calculus in high school because of this one test I took in seventh grade. And from there, that made, when as I told you, my advisor wasn't very supportive. It was that, oh, you didn't do really well on your in your math SAT, so you can't be a chemistry major. and now I have a PhD in chemistry. So, it's when you try to do that to people. And I remember leaving that meeting with the advisor, calling my mom, being like, I can't do this. And her being like, you're not going to let some woman that doesn't know you tell you that you can't do this. So,
Exactly.
like, that's where that support came from. Sign up for a class and see if you can do it, Tara. And I signed up, and it was a struggle because I never did like math. I still don't want to tutor calculus either, so don't worry. But yeah, like that box that they put me in the seventh grade affected the rest of my academic career, which not all kids are great at taking tests, right? So I think that's where when we put people in a box, that shows you just the kind of, I don't want to say damage, right? Like that, maybe that's a little exaggerative, but it affected me forever. And maybe even thinking when, making me rethink, can I really do this? I talked to my
Mhm.
advisor. She told me I'm not good at this.
You just jogged something in my mind. I should have asked you this before, but I'll just bring it up now because it's I think one other important piece of the story, and that's just the general theme of burnout. And we talk about burnout in different contexts on the show in terms of caregiving for an elder with dementia or physician burnout during the pandemic. Can you say just a couple words about burnout? Because I know a lot of, in neurodivergent students, really high achieving ones, they can, burn out quickly, depending on, and I was just wondering if you could say anything about, ultimately how you think about burnout and strategies at that sort of end of the spectrum that you employ either in the practice or made mention in the book.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, I didn't this
no, you're
earlier.
fine. You're good. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of burnout, that is really when they're not asking for help, right? Like I can do this all on my own. And like I said, I think like a student staring at a computer screen for 4 hours, or students who like let's say we're talking about chemistry, right?
Yeah.
I always tell students, make friends in your class because when you can't do a problem at 2 a.m. or whatever, we know student schedules are crazy, right?
Mm,
Then you can't ask me. I will not be awake, right? So find your people, make your friends. And I remember being in college and six of us being 11, midnight, whatever time it was, being in a room in the library trying to figure out our problem sets that we're doing the next day, right? So having people that understand it instead of you the more we stare or stare at something, like I'm the same way, like I said, let's about writing my book, the more I stare at something and I'm stuck, like
yeah.
the more panicked I get, the more freaked out I get, right? That leads to me and to students, same thing, not sleeping. And then we're not sleeping, which then causes all kinds of problems that we know about, right? And
Okay.
then from there maybe we're not eating great, which causes more problems, and that's just going to cause a cycle of where you get to a student who is not doing well in any of their classes because then we're focusing on one class so hard because we're panicking and scared we're not going to pass it, and then all of them sort of go by the wayside. So
Yeah.
I would say that burnout comes in when we're not asking for help.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about my own life. When I'm having a really bad day, like I need to call one of my friends to be like, okay, Tara, like what can you do to fix it? And what can you not do? What can you control and can you not control? And I think that for burnout works for students too. What can they control versus what can they not control? So that's my advice is
No,
get
it's
sleep, find your people, talk to your professors, talk to accessibility, talk to your parents and your friends. Like we all need that support system, and don't stare at a computer screen for 5 hours without asking for help, and don't stay up all night. Please stop staying up all night studying for tests.
important for for college as well as life in general. But yeah, I mean, again, I appreciate all these insights and sort of the diversity of the context and the way you have to think about these issues. But it's really impressive work. Again, a topic that we don't normally get into, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all these important angles and the types of things you think about, and just wish you the best with your consultancy with the new book, and really, I look forward to continue to follow your journey as well because it's again, it's been quite inspiring where you've come from, and again, that you're taking care of these students now and guiding them at this really crucial point of their life is just so important. So bravo on that. Again, for everybody out there that is going to be listening to this episode across the various podcasts or who will be watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Dr. Tara Williams, founder, owner of Innovative Collegiate Consultants. We'll put a link in the bio. Also, be on the lookout in a couple of months for the Neurodivergent student journey, the story of hope and breaking out of the box, soon to be available all major booksellers. Again, Tara, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show today and talk to us and educate us on a series of topics that we haven't really gotten into too much. So I really thank you for that. Thank you for what you do for students. And as we like to say here on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for a lot of people out there via what you do. Really an awesome story.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate getting to tell it today on your podcast.
Great having you.